When she left for work that August morning in 1995, Diane Van Reeth had no idea she'd never be seen again. Her minivan turned up 2 days later, keys inside, no sign of her. But when investigators looked closer at her husband, everything unraveled. A fake name, a violent past, and a trail of women he sought to control. This is her story.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Amy.
And you're listening to She Goes by Jane. At the end of this episode and every episode, we will be joined by a special guest who will read an original poem by Amy Baker about the women we're featuring. This week, we are joined by Taylor Blackwell.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Amy.
Vanessa, today's episode is a lot.
What kind of a lot?
There's going to be a lot of people to keep track of in this episode. So I'm just preparing us all.
Pay attention.
To pay attention, yes.
Okay.
There's some twists, some turns, some unexpected directions, but there's just a lot of people who were impacted by this story. So let's just get started.
Sounds good.
Okay. On a Thursday morning in August 1995, 35-year-old Diane Van Reeth didn't show up for work at Tucson Electric Power. It was unusual. Diane was always there early, often by 6 a.m., so she could get done work early and spend the afternoon with her two sons. When her coworkers realized her van wasn't in the lot and no one had seen her, they called police. Back home, her husband and boys think she's at work. And when the police speak to her husband, he said she left early like she did every morning. Now, like so many of the missing that we talk about, it just really seemed like Diane Van Reeth just disappeared into thin air. But 2 days later, just a few blocks from her home, her van is found abandoned. Beyond being abandoned, nothing seems unusual with the van. There's no signs of struggle or foul play to indicate that something happened to Diane. And though a search for Diane is launched immediately, there's just no trace of her. But as coworkers are handing out flyers and volunteers begin searching the desert near Tucson, suspicions begin to rise to the surface about just what or who caused Diane's disappearance. And before we get deeper into Diane's story, I am just going to issue a content warning to our listeners that today's episode does deal with domestic violence.
So I thought that when you started talking about this, that domestic violence might come into play here, because it's like, I don't know, it just seemed weird that her husband's at home and says that she left for work, and then the van 2 days later. It just seems like he would be like, oh yeah, she's gone, so's her van, all of this stuff. And when that's not happening, I'm like, okay, this might be the husband.
Right. So like when it's like the coworkers who are the ones that report her missing, not her husband, right?
Right.
Yeah. So this is, there are layers and upon layers of domestic violence in this episode. So just a major warning.
Okay.
And we see these patterns quite a bit in these stories. And it's just really heartbreaking that like we are not better at interventions to protect people beforehand, right?
Right. I mean, and it's definitely like, I think a lot of people see this and think this is something that happens rarely. But like even just in our own small town, there's been a ton of domestic violence cases that ended in death just over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely, like you said, if we can figure out those warning signs and figure out how better to protect women, it would make a huge difference.
Right. So this was a hard episode to research just because I just feel like there were plenty of opportunities by people before this moment. Now, much of Diane's life, though, was fairly typical. She was born in 1959, and unlike many transplants to Arizona, she was actually a lifelong resident of Tucson. Diane attended Cholla High School, and since so little was ever reported about Diane, my guess is that she actually took some time off from school after she graduated from high school, just because I'm like trying to piece together the different dates. Now, the pieces of Diane's life that I could put together primarily came from her mother. Her mother said that around 1980 or maybe 1981, Diane met Dawn. Diane was working as a waitress, and Dawn was one of her customers. By 1986, the couple was married. My guess is shortly after is when she went to the University of Arizona, known rivals of my beloved Arizona State University, and she got her degree in accounting in 1988. And then she kind of worked as a certified public accountant after that.
Okay, wait. So we're saying her husband's name?
Yeah, you're just going to have to bear with me on this.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought I knew something and now I don't know.
You were going to be like, you made a mistake.
Maybe.
Yeah, no.
I have to go with the flow with you, like always.
Right.
And you know how impatient I am.
Yes, but...
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll wait.
Okay. You're going to wait.
So is everybody else.
So
bear with me, guys.
Diane is married to Don.
Okay.
Now, Diane, she's hustling, right? So she's gotten her degree. And she started working at Tucson Electric Power as a tax research coordinator in March 1991. She really excelled at her job, and she seemed to enjoy it and her coworkers, but her true love was her children. 2 boys who were born in 1990 and 1992. She arranged her life around those boys, arriving at work in the early morning hours so that she could just have time with them in the afternoon. Her neighbors said that she was a regular sight around Winter Haven neighborhood, pulling the 2 of them in a little red wagon. Now, like so many missing women, from the outside, there was little indication of what would lead to her mysterious disappearance on August 10th, 1995. She was just there one day and gone in a matter of moments. In interviews, her mother insisted that it was not possible that her daughter would leave on her own. She would never abandon her 2 boys like that. I know she didn't go off and is sitting in a resort somewhere, her mother said. And her coworkers agreed. By August 26th, many of them joined her friends, family, and other volunteers, and they all gathered to search for her, but to no avail. A week later, Tucson Electric offered half of the $10,000 reward for information leading to the return of Diane. And despite the substantial reward, no one was able to claim it. Diane remained missing. Now, to many, it seemed like little was happening in Diane's case. Her desk remained empty, and there were too few news articles about her, which was really quite unusual in a case of a young missing mom. But in September, this changed. On September 18th, police announced that Diane's husband, Don, had been arrested at their Winter Haven home and charged with attempted murder.
So it is Don.
Well, he wasn't charged in the attempted murder of Diane.
Why are we saying his name? We're going to get there, right?
We are going to get there. Now, the police, they quickly informed the public that this didn't have anything to do with Diane's disappearance, this arrest. It was related to the 1979 aggravated assault and attempted murder of a man named Michael Rank in Chelmsford, Massachusetts.
What are you doing to me, Amy?
What?
I thought it was about Diane, and now it's about Michael?
Yes, so they arrested him for attempted murder, but it was in a 1979 case.
Okay.
Of a man named Michael.
No matter what, Don just seems to be up to no good, right?
Right. Okay. Furthermore, and this is the part that I think you are waiting for
this.
That's just going to put things together for you.
Okay.
Police announced that Don was actually an alias. And that Diane's husband had actually been using a stolen identity from a high school classmate, that he had stolen this identity way back in the 1970s, and he'd been using this man's name and his date of birth.
So Diane never knew Don as anybody other than Don.
So
did she know that he had an alias?
Stick with me here.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Okay.
But as a quick aside, this was really strange because we just did an episode about a young woman named Nicole Russo, right, who was murdered by her partner. And that kid had stolen an identity from his high school classmate as well. And so I actually researched these back to back.
And you use that name too.
Yeah.
So you're using aliases or initials.
Yeah.
Now. That's
for clarity.
For clarity. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just kind of a weird experience.
Weird.
That was my aside. But okay, so back to Don.
Okay.
Or not Don.
This guy we're going to call Don.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Don was being held in the Pima County Jail and then rebooked 2 days later for 6 counts of forgery. under his alias, he'd actually bought a home, opened credit cards and bank accounts, and had even gotten an Arizona driver's license. All of this is not allowed in Arizona under any form, using an alias was not legal. What investigators uncovered in Dawn's past, though, would send shockwaves through Diane's family and reveal a chilling pattern of violence that spanned decades and states. The case in Massachusetts, where he was originally from, involved a couple named Janet and Michael Rank. At the time of Dawn's arrest, the couple, who was now in their 30s, had a long history with Dawn, and Janet's, in particular, ran deep. And this arrest was the first glimmer of hope they had of their long nightmare ending. We're going to fill you in about why Janet and Michael are part of this story.
And Michael's the guy that Dawn tried to kill.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Janet had known Dawn long before he was Dawn.
Okay, so she knew the real Dawn?
Yes. And so this was long before he moved to Arizona, long before he met and married Diane. Now, when Janet was just 16, she had been at a skating rink when she met this significantly older Don, as we'll keep calling him.
Mm-hmm.
Soon, the two were dating, despite the fact that she was aware of his reputation. And his reputation was not good.
So how much older is he than Janet?
I believe he's 6 years older than her.
Okay.
Now, by the time Janet has met Don, he has a history, and I'm just going to tell you what that history is.
Okay.
In December of 1971, Don was a sophomore in high school when he was convicted of the murder of a Nashua, New Hampshire man named Paul.
As a sophomore?
Yes, in high school.
Yikes.
Paul had been found shot in the head in a wooded area 2 days after his bullet-ridden car had been located. Now, Don was arrested for Paul's murder just 2 hours after Paul's body was found. And Don would say Paul, who was almost 30 years older than him, had come on to him, and this is why he murdered him.
So he admitted to that murder? Wow. As a sophomore.
In high school.
So he's he's calling it self-defense at this point.
Yes. Now, given the culture of the 1970s, this is likely why this led to a very shortened jail sentence for Don.
Ew.
In less than a year, he was out.
Okay.
And so I'm not blaming 16-year-old Janet for overlooking this crime when even the courts had, but Janet really wanted to see the good in Don when she met him.
Well, and so to be fair, Don is 15-ish, and he killed a 45-year-old?
Yeah.
So that could be looking like self-defense at that point, could it?
I think that there are ways that many people in his life kind of excused what was happening.
Right. And in the 70s, anything about a man coming on to another man would be
extremely taboo.
Yeah,
right?
Extremely.
Right. So, yeah.
Okay.
This
so
is
it's
just
complicated. It's
horrifying.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, what Janet ended up getting, though, was a horrific 6-year-long relationship with someone intent on controlling her every move. Janet would later say he started isolating her from her friends and family. And then came the threats. He said that he would harm her family if she ever left him. And he said he would harm her. She remembered one of his particular threats was that he was going to take her to the woods in New Hampshire, tie her to the tree, and then leave her there to starve. Despite her family begging her to end the relationship with him and warning her that he was bad for her, Janet said that she felt trapped. She worried what would happen if she stayed, but she also worried about what would happen if she left. In the spring of 1979, though, she was able to break free of him, kicking him out of the apartment she shared with him. As she would later say, "I knew it was going to be do or die. I had to break away or he was going to follow through with his threats." Now, even though their relationship was over, she also knew that he wouldn't be easily done with her. She said he started stalking her, hiding behind trees in her backyard, and following her to work. In one particularly terrifying incident, she says he forced her car off the road, and then when he approached her vehicle, she saw that he had a gun in his waistband. She said she persuaded him to go back to his own vehicle and put the gun away, but during the conversation, he told her he was carrying it because someone stole something from him. Though he wasn't explicit in his meaning, she just assumed that what he meant was the fact that she had started dating someone new who was a man named Michael. 2 weeks later, on May 20th, 1979, Michael drove Janet to her workplace, the Veterans Hospital in Lowell. likely looking out for her after her encounter with Dawn. After dropping Janet off, Michael said he noticed a car following him. It was a white Monte Carlo. At an isolated spot on the highway, the Monte Carlo pulled up beside him and the driver fired 6 shots into Michael's car. Michael was hit by 3 of those bullets, one in the shoulder, one in the back, and one in the throat. Yeah.
Yeah, so this was very attempted murdery.
Right.
The throat one.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, he acted quickly. So Michael said he jammed on the brakes and he dove to the floor of his own car. And when he sat back up, he saw the Monte Carlo was coming back towards him. That's when Michael said he turned the car around and drove to the nearest police station, blowing his horn as he got close. The Monte Carlo was still following. Michael stopped his car, stumbled out of it and into the station, and promptly collapsed. Though he didn't get a full view of the driver, he knew who it was. Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
Not long after, police went to Dawn's house. Outside was a white Monte Carlo that Dawn had rented a few days before. Dawn was quickly arrested, but was released when his parents paid his bail while he awaited trial. Shortly after, Dawn left town.
So his parents paid the bail. His parents must know that he killed somebody when he was in high school.
Yes.
And now he's shooting at another guy.
Yes.
So there's no way to bend this all the time into that, oh, he's innocent and the other person is at fault. So what are the parents doing here?
Right. We're going to talk a little bit about that because even though Dawn had been charged with assault and attempted murder in the attack against Michael, the search for him wasn't exactly robust. You see, his father was a truck mechanic, but his mother was the town's director of services to the elderly, and both were really active in the community.
Okay.
In fact, later on in 1988, his mother was the treasurer of the committee that raised money to build a new police station and dedicated it to the chief of police.
Yeah, so I don't understand what they're doing here. Are they just kind of trying to cover stuff up so they don't look like they are parents of a murderer?
Yeah, I mean, this is where it's just what role do families play in this? Right? We'll be back in a moment. Yeah. Now, all of this had kind of faded because it took Pima County investigators digging into Diane's disappearance to actually uncover those charges. They actually had to ask for those charges to be reactivated in Massachusetts because so much time had passed. And when the chief of police was asked why he hadn't pressed Dawn's parents about, their son's whereabouts, he said he didn't want to embarrass them.
Oh, really? So it does come down to that.
Yeah. Now, meanwhile, Michael and Janet, who actually got married after the attack, they lived in fear that just one day Dawn would return.
Mm-hmm.
Janet said that she worried constantly that he would just show up one day, but she also didn't feel like she could talk to her husband about it because she was concerned, in her words, that it would be like opening old wounds. Michael, it seemed, also lived with those same concerns. Now, Dawn, though, he shows up in Arizona not long after he left Massachusetts. In learning about Dawn's crime and identity theft, Diane's mother originally insisted that her daughter couldn't have known. But the truth was actually a little more complicated than that. It's unclear when Diane learned that Dawn was living under a stolen name, but when the two were married in Arizona, they did so under his alias, his fake name, Dawn. A month later, the two had a separate private ceremony in Nevada, and there they married under his real name.
So she did know.
Yeah. Now, just before Diane disappeared, the two actually had been arguing, and one of those arguments, it seems, is that Diane wanted Dawn to start using his real name. She was tired of him lying about who he was, but he refused to do so. As investigators began to uncover more about Diane's relationship with Dawn and his past with Janet, they knew something was terribly wrong. Detective Ken Thompson told reporters, "I think there's strong possibility that she is dead. She had a good job. She was devoted to her children, 2 sons. She missed her son's 5th birthday, and no one has heard from her. Under the circumstances, we believe she's a victim of foul play." In January 1996, her case was officially classified as a homicide. Now, Dawn was extradited to Massachusetts to finally stand trial in the 1979 attack on Michael. But investigators back in Arizona were trying to put together the pieces of Diane's life. They learned that Diane had filed for divorce from Dawn in July, just a month before she disappeared. Diane's divorce lawyer, Margaret Cromwell, said that she had met with Diane on August 9th, just one day before Diane's disappearance. Diane felt that her 2 young sons were at risk, and she had asked her lawyer that she wanted it communicated that Dawn needed to move out of their home. In addition to speaking with her lawyers, investigators spoke to those closest to her. Her friend Dawn, different Dawn,
Female Dawn,
said that Diane had confided in her about the divorce, but stressed that when she met Dawn, male Dawn, herself, she didn't find anything unusual about him. That wasn't the case for others who had interacted with him. Dawn worked for George Bidwell at G&L Enterprises, which was a small machine parts manufacturer, and he worked as a supervisor. George says that he had only given Dawn a job out of kindness for Diane, whose family he had known for a while, and that he found him odd. George said, the day she was missing, he came into work and he was very nervous. He was disheveled and had a headache and went outside and smoked more than usual. He was telling us she was in hiding and he was afraid the police would start looking around and question him, and that would lead to his past.
It's always funny to hear these because, like, sometimes people afterwards are like, oh, yeah, he's like the most normal guy in the world, or he's a little odd. Like, it's like one way or the other whenever we talk about these things. But, like, I wonder what is odd, because, like, there's a lot of people that are odd, but, like,
yeah, like what
in a
was
really
it?
great way, or just like odd but harmless. Like, at what point can we tell that someone's odd in a way that would lead them to kill their own wife?
Yeah. So I don't know, like, what it was that just, like wasn't...
if it was, like, just kept him on edge. Like, I wish people just, like, embellish what their odd meant.
Right.
Don't you?
Like, could you give better quotes?
Can you just, like, maybe use, like, better words,
better
more words,
description.
Better description, yeah.
Now, others who were close to Diane, they were actually able to offer their thoughts on the state of Diane's marriage and also what she was experiencing with Dawn, so this might give some clarity.
Okay.
Diane had told her supervisor that Dawn had threatened her, and that Dawn had told her that he knew the right people to have her taken care of or gotten rid of.
Okay, so there's a huge difference between
odd and threatening
or super aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a huge difference.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the babysitter that Diane had hired for the kids also said that Diane had told her that she was scared of Dawn, and that Diane had specifically told her that he had threatened to kill her or have someone killed her if she ever tried to leave him.
Okay. So he's definitely scary.
Yeah, so there are clear patterns of behavior that echo Janet's experience with him. And it was getting increasingly clear that Diane was aware of the charges he was facing in Massachusetts. In addition to wanting him to live under his real name, apparently she also wanted him to go back and clear up the issues there. Her father said, Diane told some of her friends he was using an alias, but she didn't tell us. I don't think she wanted us to know. And painfully, slowly, life moved forward for Diane's family and friends as they waited to see what would come of her case. Initially, her parents had taken in her children, and her mother said that they were opting not to tell the children about the charges their father was facing to protect them a bit. And their house sat empty for the longest time before an estate sale was held to sell off the family's remaining belongings. Soon, a new family moved in, something the neighbors looked upon with a mix of grief and thankfulness. Finally, in November 1996, Dawn went to trial for the assault and attempted murder case involving Michael. His lawyers argued that since no one could directly identify him as the shooter, it really could have been anyone driving the Monte Carlo.
Could it?
Well, in fact, a lawyer named a friend of Dawn's who had been killed in an accident years before, but the prosecution had a witness named Deborah. Deborah had been friends with Dawn back in the day, and she was able to testify that Dawn had called her asking for her to give him an alibi for the time of the shooting.
Yeah.
She was also able to provide 3 letters that he had written to her urging her to tell police that he was at her apartment. In one letter he wrote, "The story I want you to tell the pigs must stick."
Okay, so see, yeah, he was driving the Monte Carlo.
Deborah was like, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
Soon after Dawn was found guilty, Michael said, "I wish it had happened 17 years ago, before he skipped bail. I feel today that justice has been served. But Michael and Janet had more scathing words for Don's family. During the lead up to the trial, they had learned that his parents had known where he was the entire time. Don's parents frequently traveled to see Don and Diane and the kids, meeting up with them in various places. And more shockingly, Don and Diane had even brought the kids to Massachusetts to see their grandparents. On his feelings about this, Michael told reporters, "These people have known where he was all this time. They were responsible for Van Reeth's disappearance."
Mm-hmm. So the thing with the parents, right? And the bail and like maybe we shouldn't be so quick to do that.
Yeah, so at this point, at the time of the attack on Michael, how much more, if you excused him murdering a man he was a teenager, and then are you excusing or making up a reason why he attacked Michael?
Right, I know you love your kid, but at some point you have to realize that your kid is the problem.
Right, by the time the, second arrest happens, aren't you wait?
Both with shooting at people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Don was sentenced to 26 years for his attack on Michael. But back in Pima County, investigators were working out what to do. First, because Don was already serving time in prison, they opted to drop the charges related to him using an alias. Those were kind of low-level charges I think they were using to kind of keep him there while Massachusetts figured out what they were doing, right? And it didn't make sense to pursue those legally since he was already in custody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then, in May 1997, the news that everyone was waiting for came. He was indicted for Diane's death. He would have to return to Arizona to face those charges. Soon after, the U.S. Social Security Administration declared Diane dead. This would enable Diane's children to start receiving survivor benefits. And Diane's parents actually moved forward with a civil suit against Don, and this case was primarily to ensure that Diane's children would be beneficiaries of her assets instead of Don. As they prepared for trial, some information about what might have happened to Diane reached the surface. First, the public learned that the company Don had worked for, when they moved in May 1997, they discovered hidden on the site Diane's identification, which included her driver's license, credit cards, and employee cards wrapped in a red cloth.
Did they turn that evidence over right away, or?
Yes, this didn't happen until May 1997 when they were moving. So
when they did, they found it and then they turned it in right away?
Yeah.
Okay.
But so this was pretty damning evidence that Don was connected to her case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then, in trying to decide whether information provided by members of a counseling group could be used during the trial, the public learned that Don had openly talked about wanting to electrocute Diane and throw her body in a mine shaft on Mount Lemmon. He had also spoken to a coworker about how divorce could easily be solved with an ounce of lead or by simply making your ex-spouse disappear.
Wait, who did he tell this to?
A coworker.
He told this to a coworker. Yikes.
Yeah, and a men's counseling group. So he's actively been talking to people about...
Okay, but wait, is this before or after?
Before.
So he said those things and nobody did anything?
Yeah.
Nobody was like, "Hey, lady, your husband wants to electrocute you."
No.
Or, "Hey, Diane, he's talking about making you disappear."
No.
No. Okay.
So it was clear that the defense was lining up a series of witnesses at this point who could be utilized to prove that Don had been planning to harm Diane. And again,
well, yeah, I'm just wondering, how many people are in the men's counseling group
who just opted not to say
is it a counseling group of just 2 people? Or what if there's 12 people in there that all heard that and nobody did anything?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, just days before the case was to go to trial, another person who was incarcerated at the same time as Don came forward. His name's Eugene, and he claimed that while they're in jail together, Don had told him that he had beaten Diane before stabbing her and burying her body on the north side of Tucson. Now, this would be a bombshell testimony, but due to the fact that Don's public defenders had previously represented Eugene, they would need to recuse themselves. So while Diane's family felt like they were finally on the cusp of getting answers and finding some sort of justice, this delayed the trial even longer.
Okay. Huh.
Diane's family, though, wouldn't have to wait too long. In May 1999, Don took a plea deal, pleading no contest to second-degree murder in Diane's case. While this wasn't exactly what everyone expected, Diane's mother was relieved, stating, "We're just so happy that it's over and we don't have to talk about this anymore." Now, I think that seems like a pretty, abrupt statement from her mom, and that, her mom might be trying to, brush aside what's happening or ignoring, right? Kind of like a head in the sand kind of moment.
Right, because, just because that part's over, wouldn't it just still be in your mind all the time?
Yeah, so I think it is, but what I think she was trying to do is to also protect herself from learning about, what could potentially have happened to her daughter.
Okay.
She said, in some ways, it might be easier not to know what he did.
I mean, until you're in that place, I guess you don't know how you would deal with it, right?
I think it was enough for her to know that he
did it.
He did it, but she just didn't want to know the details.
Right.
Now, part of this plea agreement was that Don was not allowed to have contact with his sons and that he would have to give up any rights he might have to Diane's estate. During the sentencing, Diane's mother said, "May a day never pass where your thoughts don't torment you with what you have done." Now, Vanessa, usually that would be the end of our episodes. It sounds like one of our endings.
I mean, it should be the end of our episode, is it not?
It is not. And that is unfortunately not the case.
How is that not the case?
Okay.
What more are you going to tell us?
So this is going to feel like a completely disconnected thing. So you're just going to have to still stick with me.
Okay.
Now, Pima County, where this is all taking place, they had a long-running mystery they were trying to work out. In 1981, two coworkers decided to go into the desert in a Jeep to hunt for rabbits. About 3.5-ish miles from the I-10 highway near the Pima County Fairgrounds, they were driving along a wash when they spotted a coat hanging from the tree. "I hope we don't find a body," one of the men said.
Oh my God, did he say that and then immediately find a body?
He did, yes.
This is an aside, but I couldn't stop laughing at your about 3 and 132.
I was
like so specific, Amy.
What kind of typo is that? I was like, that's not. Nope.
Nope.
Okay. So
how do you say that and then just find a body?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm trying to decide, if he said it in jest or he said it in, trepidation. I don't know his emotional state at this moment. But
right.
They do. So they approach to investigate. They spot a body in a small tributary wash. They only got close enough to confirm that the individual was deceased before contacting authorities. Now, when authorities arrived, they discovered the body of a young woman. She had on a blue blouse with burgundy flowers, and her face was scratched as though she had walked or run through some desert brush. It was believed that she had been strangled with a ligature and sexually assaulted. Likely all this happened within 48 hours of her discovery, so 36 to 48 hours. Later, when the FBI was able to obtain fingerprints from her body, they were not a match to any missing persons reports nationwide. She was buried in a local cemetery, and as years passed, she eventually became the oldest unidentified homicide victim in the county. For years, investigators worked to figure out who she was, but with little success. And in 2012, they tried a new tactic. They exhumed her body, and her skull was used in a new reconstruction. Now, releasing facial reconstruction, age progressions, and drawing has long been one of the tools to give face to an unidentified person. People are much more likely to stop and share information when there's an image attached to an unidentified person case. Despite these efforts, though, not much traction happened. Until one day, in 2021, an investigator looking at her image realized that she looked strikingly similar to a photo he'd seen before.
Wow, and that's in 2021, and you said they found her in 1981?
Yep.
Wow.
Now, when Don was arrested, he'd had a photo of a woman in his wallet. In it, a woman with long blonde hair. It's waving around her face. Her head is tilted to an angle. She wore a brown floral dress with puffed sleeves, and she was clutching a bouquet of wildflowers in one hand. And when investigators asked who she was, Dawn refused to answer.
So the photo of that woman was in Dawn's wallet?
Yes. Now, investigators they go to the storage unit. Dawn's belongings are still there, kept after all these years, and the woman's photo is still inside. So could she be their mystery Pima County Jane Doe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, investigators were ready to find out, and the photo was circulated around the Pima area with no results. And they decided to circulate the image back on the East Coast where Dawn was from. There, thousands of miles away from Arizona, a man named Bill recognized his older sister, Brenda Gerow. Brenda and Bill had grown up in New Hampshire area and were in and out of foster care for much of their young lives. Still, the two were close, and Bill looked up to Brenda. She took him to his first rock concert, which was Led Zeppelin in 1977. Bill says that Brenda was a flower child and that she had a lot of friends and a lot of people who wanted to be her friend. By 1980, Brenda was working at a local biker bar called OJ's, and a man named Jack kept coming to the bar. He showed up again and again. Brenda thought he looked a lot like Rick Springfield with his long black hair, but Bill didn't like him. He thought Jack was a wannabe and that he could get good feelings about him. Friends also warned Bill about Jack, and he tried to pass those warnings on to Brenda, and Brenda was not having it. Bill says she would just brush him off and say, "Oh, you have to get to know him."
So, obviously, Dawn's not the first alias?
No.
Yeah.
Now, the last time Bill saw Brenda, she told him she was heading to the Southwest with Jack. "I love you and I'll be back," she said before the two got onto his motorcycle and disappeared. The next time he heard from her was about 2 months later when she called from a payphone in New Mexico. He said the call wasn't long, but she was telling him that she had bought him some turquoise jewelry and that she'd be sending it in the mail. A few months later, she called again. "I'm coming home," she said. When Bill asked her if she was okay, she said, "No, I'm coming home. I'll see you soon. I can't talk right now." Before she hung up, she told him she loved him. Bill never heard from his sister again. Back in the day, Bill had tried to file a missing persons report, but he was told it was just likely that his sister didn't want to be found. So, decades later, staring at her face once again in an old photo being circulated by the Pima County investigators, he had to have been feeling that loss all over again. Bill's DNA was compared to Pima County Jane Doe's. It was a match. After all these years, Brenda had been found. Jack, the man Brenda had left town with all those years ago, was, yes, just an alias for Dawn. Dawn served time for the attack on Michael and Diane's murder concurrently. He was released from prison in 2019. To date, no one has been charged in Brenda's murder, and Diane is still missing.
We are now going to listen to Amy's poem, The Naming, read by Taylor Blackwell. Taylor is an actor, musician, visual artist, writer, director, and creator of the Infinite Possibilities Oracle deck. Taylor is a member of bubblegum punk band The 10th, which they co-founded with actress Harley Quinn Smith. In addition, Taylor released their own solo album, In Memory of Haroldine.
The Naming. Diane Van Reeth, 35, missing since August 10th, 1995, from Tucson, Arizona. Having the language to name is a way to see the world, to know what exists around you, the shape and size of it all. In the heart of the Sonoran, tourists will say cactus, not understanding the difference. Barrel, cholla, organ pipe. This is how you learn the desert. The way sunlight catches on the spines of the saguaro. The name for the small wash where a woman's body was found. It's how you didn't know the word for the silvered thread tying your life to hers. The small portrait hidden in your husband's wallet, something you didn't have language for. The way she held a wilted bouquet of wildflowers, the word for which is an offering, a warning, a reason to look again and name it.
For more information about our show, please visit shegoesbyjanepodcast.com.
Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Amy.